Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
So I have to tell you, so we were actually in the middle of this Torah Temimah, and it's as if he's a detective, and he's looking for clues, and his field of operation is, of course, pretty much the entire rabbinic Irv. And he comes across an idea that he has that's based on something else that he has already shared with us. And he then, breaks it down even further to help us understand the elements of it. This is something that I learned actually not that long ago, but the more you know something, the more you're able to deconstruct it. In other words, you could say that knowledge is the ability to deconstruct something. And so that's what in this area here, he is doing a lot of the deconstruction. But you'll see that in a way he is on a path to prove something, which is a result eventually of his researches. And let's see, I hope I can get a lot of this done today. So what happened was we started off with this Ha-Mo-N GoYiM, right? The father of a multitude of nations. And we have this great, great Talmudic sage, Rabbi Yochanan, who is saying that, as a matter of fact, we have the idea of shorthand in the Torah, right? Stenography. And we discussed that. We discussed that. And then he takes this Ha-Mo-N. Do you see how these slash marks in Hebrew are the way you indicate an acronym or an abbreviation, etc. In other words, we're going to look at every letter of this, Aleph, Bet, Hey, Mem, Vav, Nun, and he's saying that is actually the stenographic idea here in the Torah where it uses that term. So you can see that the Aleph is a little bit larger, just to keep you on the idea. Here's the Bet. Notice the chet, which is where he's going to start a major excursus, right? Because what would you expect, right? You'd expect to see a hey. So that's something that he is going to have to explain, right? But going on, I mean, he goes through the whole thing. Here we go, down at the bottom. Here, let's see. There's the mem, right? The mem and the vav and the nun, right? Of Hamon. So he's now taken care of. This is the stuff that's in the large print. I want you to know. This part here above the line is essentially the material he has found in the Talmud or in other rabbinic sources. Many, many, if not most of them are from. He tells you where he gets them. Okay, so for example, this is from Tractate Shabbat, page 105a, the A side of the page. That's where he got this basic idea. He does something else, though. He doesn't simply lift it from the Talmud. What he does is he tries to put it in language that is easier to understand. So this isn't just a matter of finding the quotes. This is also a matter of taking those quotes and trying to put them in a language that is more accessible than sometimes the language of the Gemara. And then in his footnotes, he starts to break down things. So we already took care of this footnote here, but now we're going to look at the Av is Nataticha Le'umot. We may have done this, in fact. Let me look. No, we didn't look at this. So the Aleph stands for Av Nataticha Le'umot. I have made you a patriarch for nations, for nations. And now we can take a look. And I'm going to try and enlarge this a little bit. That's the beauty of new computers, new age computers, etc. Okay, so shekamo katav, right? This is again, you see the slash marks that's telling you this is actually an abbreviation, right? And for kamo katav or katuv, probably kamo katuv, as is written. And when it says it's written, it is a reference either to the Torah or to the Tanakh. That's what this is. This has a technical meaning besides its simple meaning of as is written. Because when they say as is written, they mean in scripture. V'hayita la'av Ha-Mo-N GoYiM. It says that actually, of course, in Genesis. It goes on to say it. And there's the Av, right? The Av, Aleph of Av. Let's take a look at this. So now the bet. Bachur netaticha ba'umot. So Bachur, I believe here means chosen, right? I have made you choice among the nations. And here we're going to have to see how does he get that? So we're going to look at the Yud Bet. So, Kamoshe Katuv. And now you have to look a little bit further along in the Bible, all the way to the book of Nehemiah. So Nehemiah 9, chapter 9, that's what that refers to. By the way, you see that the level of how I like to describe this, I like to use the metaphor of a well-plowed field, that the Bible itself is so carefully gone over that, you know, the Masoretes, they counted letters, they counted words, etc., etc. They looked at it so carefully, right? So here in the book of Nehemiah, it says, Atahu ha-Elohim, you are the God, Asher Bacharta, and there's the Bachar, right? He says, explicitly it says, you chose Abram, right? Abram. And it says, I believe it may have said, and you made his name Abraham. And he says he's going to say more about it, but not here. So he says this stands for Iyain. So notice the one slash mark. The one slash mark simply means that it's a word that's been abbreviated. It's not an acronym, right? Ve'iyain, and check it out. Vide, I suppose we'd put, right? Besamuch ut tetzayin. Look at the, and he's going to say, I think he's referring here to the footnote 16. Going back. So we've taken care of the Av, Aleph, Bet, right? Onwards. And now we're going to go into this. This is where it's going to take a long time. We're going to go through a bunch of things. This took me a long time because I had a lot of references that I wasn't familiar with that I had to look in. And this is what you're seeing here in this additional page here. I mean, it was just a matter of going to Safaria and cutting and pasting, but it still was a matter of making sure I found the references, and it's not a perfect job, but at least hopefully it's a helpful job. So this is the Ha, and it says Chaviv netaticha ba'umot, right? So Chaviv means like darling, you know, words like that. In other words, the idea that Abraham was someone that people, the nations saw was a delightful person. Those are the kinds of words that Chaviv means. So, for example, if I don't know if they use it anymore in modern Hebrew, but if you wanted to say to somebody, sweetheart, or you know, just like in an affectionate kind of way, it's a word of affection. You'd say Habibi, my sweetie, right? Netaticha b'omot, I have made you amongst the nations. So now we're going to have to deal with this. Okay? Here we go. Right, here we go. So it says, I believe, let's see, we're on to Yud Gimel, right? Yud Gimel. And he says, find Yud Gimel here. Had it a second ago, and now I have to find it again. Here we are. Kemoshe Katuv, as it says, Zera Avraham Ohavai, right? The seed, that is the Jewish people, are the seed of Abraham, the one who loved me. The one who loved me. But he still has to go on to say, right? But of course, this isn't taking care of the hay, right? It isn't doing that, or the chet, or anything, right? But just says, here we go. V'rigilim chazal, right? And our sages of blessed memory were wont lidrosh hay kamo chet. That very often they would interpret the letter hay as if it was a letter chet. Why? Mipnei shehem mimutza echad, because they come from the same place in the mouth. That when you express it, the difference between a h and a ch, right? Very. Well, some people can't even pronounce a ch. They would pronounce it as a ha, but they all come from the same part in the mouth, and that's why. Ulachen darshu min hey de hamon hamila chaviv. And that's why they took the hey of the word hamon, right? As if, and they took the hey and said it stood for the word chaviv. And now he gives other examples. He is quite rigorous, as you'll see, and he's like this detective making sure that the clue he is given, which he just gave, right, is in fact an accurate clue. And the way he's going to do that is, I'm not saying he's exhaustive, although you'll see he gives many examples. Right, so here we go. V'chein darshu bivrachot lamed bet. And so they explain in the tractate Brachot, page 30b, Bahadrat Kodesh, right? So that's the word in the Psalms where it says, you should recognize or acknowledge God in the Hadrat Kodesh, which would mean the beauty of holiness. And the rabbis did a drush on it, and they said, Al tikra bahadrat. Don't read that as the beauty of holiness, ella bechardat. But see, they substituted the hey with a chet, and chardat means, but in the trembling of holiness. You've heard possibly the term charedim. It comes from another part of Isaiah, beautiful, actually, haftarah of I think it could be the haftarah for Rosh Chodesh, could be, where he talks about that he's not looking for, or it could be, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it is. So where God is saying he's not looking for big, beautiful buildings, etc., what he's really looking for is people who tremble at his word. In other words, who take God's commandments and take him so seriously that they tremble at the thought that they might be violating those words, that is really what God looks for, right? And so they say this Hadrat Kodesh, read it as chardat, right, trembling. Vesham, so sham means the same ibid, right? In other words, brachot, tractate brachot, lamed hey aleph, page 35a, kodesh hilulim, right? It means, right? It means, this is talking about taking produce to Jerusalem. That's the context of this. And hilulim from the word hallel, right? So you take up these particular offerings up to Jerusalem, on which you sing praise, okay, of these things. Darshu, they interpret it as Kodesh Chilulim, right? They took a hey, changed it to a chet, and that meant that, in other words, that when you were taking produce that had to be separated in order to be taken up to Jerusalem, you could then desanctify it, in other words, by eating it yourself, right, once you've taken it up to Jerusalem. I believe that was the proof of this. I did not look it up and give you, as I did later on, the quotations, the citations from the Talmud itself. And so we're on to, that's now, right, 2 examples, right? Is it? I believe? Okay, so let's keep going. Uve Shabbat Lamed Bet, Tractate Shabbat, page 32b. Al tikra behala, ela bechala. Do not read this as behala, as panic, but rather as bechala. I'm not sure if I looked this up. See, there's my little footnote there. But read it as beginning. So let's take a look down here. This is, I just gave you the English here. Rabbi Elazar Hamodai said, reverse the order of the letters in the word pachaz and then interpret it homiletically. So, pachaz, this is, by the way, I believe, from Jacob's blessing, quote, quote, right, to Reuben on his deathbed. And he says, pachaz kamayim, and he uses the word pachas, right, unstable as water. You will not have al totar, meaning, in a sense, you even though he's firstborn, he will not have the sort of position of a firstborn, right? And he says, take Elazar Hamodai says, reverse the orders of the letters. In other words, take the word pachaz, reverse it, right? So zazta, right? You shook, and now hirtata, right? So hirtata, you recoiled. The chet in pachaz is interchanged with the letter hey, so that you would not sin, and the sin parcha from you. That's the of Pachas flew from you. What is this a reference to? Well, in the blessing there, Jacob is mentioning the fact that Reuben apple pied his bed, right? Apple pied Jacob's bed so that he would not be able to spend the night with Bilhah, right? And the reason why Reuben did it wasn't actually out of deep disrespect for his father, right? One of the Ten Commandments is to honor your father and your mother. He did it because he wanted to honor his mother who was still living, right? That is, after Rachel died, Jacob went to her handmaid. He wanted to cohabit with her handmaid, that was Bilhah, and Reuben did not want to see this. And the issue is, would he be punished for this? And he's saying, Rabbi Elazar Hamodai and the other rabbis are saying in this discussion in the Talmud that Reuben actually wasn't to be punished for this, that in fact he recoiled, right? Hirtata. So that's this particular element here. Let's see here. Okay. Visham, Visham Nun Hey Bet. Okay. And there, let's make sure. Yeah. Right. Let's see. I translate it as Bechala. Uh, okay. Yeah. It says it's right. You would not sin Behalt. Yeah. From Pachas. Well, I'm trying to think now. Did I give you the right? No, 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 no. Yeah. Because it sounds like it's the other way around, right? Because pachaz, this should be actually maybe interchanged, right? And so, in other words, this bechala, right, which should be the pachaz, should be behala. You should read it as a hey. I'll have to look into that further. This is just realizing this. Visham, and again in Shabbat, page 55b, right? Pachaz. Oh no, this is the one. This is the one. Sorry. Oh dear. This is the one I actually did. So I'm gonna have to do this. Move this here. And I need to look back at Shabbat 32b. That is not what this is here. This is not it. This is this here. So this is right. Here it says Pachaz Kamaim. So here this is something else, and I'm going to have to look up and see what the reference is. And sad to say, this is not something that I seldom do, but I confuse these two things. This is not, I want to be clear about it, we're not talking about the Pachas Kamayim here, we're talking about it here. Okay, that's the one we just looked at. And it's wonderful that I'm recording this so that I can record my mistake. Uva Eruvin Yud Tet Aleph, and in Eruvin, Tractate Eruvin 19a, Darshu Gehinom, the word Gehinom, which basically Gehinom means the place where wicked people go, something to that effect, right? Ge Sheyordin La Al Iskei Chinam. It is the valley that they go down to because they engaged in worthless things. Worthless things being a euphemism for sexual immorality. And he says, Yen Sham Maharsha, check out, you've heard me talk about, I believe, Shlomo Iddles, who is the Maharsha, one of the major commentators that's found in the back of the Talmuds, of Talmud Bavli. So again, this, of course, he's just, obviously he's familiar with these people, right? Torah T'mimah. V'hamefashim lo ba'aruze, but the people who are explaining the Talmud didn't explain this. They didn't clarify where they got the chinam from Gehinom. Okay, here we go. Upsachim Peitet Aleph, and in Tractate Pesachim, that's this is 89a. Darshu, again, they interpret Meheyot Miseh, and we'll take a look carefully at what they're talking about. This is in Pesachim, and they're talking about various details involving the Pesach sacrifice. And here the sentence is about the fact that the Talmud is actually, sorry, the Torah is actually giving an amazing example of oral law, because essentially they're saying you're to take the lamb for a family and you're to consume the entire lamb that night as a sacrifice. And then remember, the subtext of the oral law is circumstances alter cases. And they go on to say, but if the family's not big enough to consume an entire lamb, then others can subscribe to this lamb from outside the family. That's the context of this Mehiyot Miseh. And what they're saying is to what degree, in other words, is there some statute of limitations at which point the family can subscribe to the lamb? In other words, what happens if the lamb's been slaughtered already? Can a family still subscribe to it? Or is it over? Right? So they're discussing at what point the rabbis, because they want to apply the laws of the Torah to life, and they realize life produces circumstances, and so they say mechayoto, meaning that as long as the lamb is alive, mechayoto deseh, as long as the lamb is still living. And so they've taken the mehiyot, the hay of mehiyot, and they've substituted a chet, and they've come up with this interpretation. Let's take a look here, right? Right. Okay. Oh, so actually, again, memory. The issue is what happens if you want to unsubscribe? If you want to unsubscribe, you subscribed, and then you want to unsubscribe from that. And the rabbis hold that from being mehiyot from a lamb indicates that one can withdraw. Okay, so I was saying can subscribe. They're saying, okay, fine. Presumably you are subscribing while the lamb is living, but what about if you want to unsubscribe from it? And they're saying one can withdraw only during the life mechayute of the lamb. In other words, while the lamb is still alive. Once the lamb's been slaughtered, nope. This is why it's good that I wrote this down. Felt it was important. Okay, precisely because there's some proverb that says, I think it's a Chinese one that says that the faintest ink is more powerful than the strongest memory. Well, given my memory at this point, we won't say any more. Okay. Uveresh Moed Katan, at the beginning of the tractate Moed Katan, page 2, that's got to be the beginning. Aleph, the 2a is right at the beginning. Mashkin Beit Hashlachin, okay, something like you water the Beit Hashlachin. This is some kind of field. So what is Beit Hashlachin? Or Shalchin, right? Umefaresh beGemara, and in the Gemara, which is commenting on the Mishnah, Beit Hashalchin, right? When they comment on this word Beit Hashchin, he says Lishna de. I think. Let me move this up a little bit so I can see. Okay, Ditzachuta. It is an expression of parched land. Who? Dichtiv, how do we know this? Well, this is, you'll see. Va'ata ayef v'yakeya, right? It was saying something, you are tired and worn out. Umitargin va'at, and the Aramaic of that is va'at mishal hey. So that's the shal. So really, right? Look at this. It's shalchin with a chet, but they're taking the mishal hey and saying is in that is referring to the Beit HaShalchin, and you get it because there is a cognate in Aramaic that has to do with being parched, right? Upiresh Rashi, and there in the Gemara, there in let's see, it was Moed Katan. Rashi explains, "Hey mitchalef bechet." He says you can exchange a hey with a chet. Another example, look at this. I wasn't kidding when I said he goes crazy here with giving us examples where you can exchange it. Either way, either way. Uve Menachot Nun Gimel Aleph, and in the tractate Menachot 53a, and this is the last one we'll do today, Matzah Tihiyeh, right? It says matzah tihiyeh. Let's take a look. I have something down here. Let's see. Nope, it's not the one. It's here, right? I think. Yeah, yeah. It shall be of matzah, right? So, Rab Ami said to Rabbi Parida, the halacha of meal offerings is not derived from Passover, as it is written, because the Pesach, obviously there may be in fact some issues going on there in terms of the fact that there's to be no leavening, right? Something like that. But anyway, as it is written in the context of a meal offering itself, that is, when it talks about in Leviticus, it talks about menachot, about leave offerings, it shall be of matzah. So we might have thought that matzah has something to do with Pesach in that context, right? It shall be of matzah, which can be read as meaning preserve, hachaye matzah, that is, preserve the matzah as it is. So they're taking tihiyah and they're putting a chet there, right? You're getting the point here, and drushing out and deriving law from it as well. Okay. So yeah, here matzah tihiyeh tichyeh, and let's just stop here for now. I'll see if I can do this. My Yep. Okay, that's helpful. It didn't do it the other day. So let me get that in here. And we will take a look over here tomorrow when we continue this. So I'm going to stop the share and we'll take a look at this tomorrow. If you want to say anything for the record, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, I will go off the recording.